Oh, hey, come on in. Let's talk about pocket knives. All right, well, I've got two knives I received in the mail today, and we're going to go ahead and get started on them. It's rare I can get to them this quickly, but we're kind of at that point in the day. This one is an Uncle Henry, of course, made by Schrade. It's a good size stock one. I think it was an 885 model with the stainless steel blades. Of course, the main blade is broken. And the main bolster is missing. Now, this is an older one. I would have to look it up to see the details, but it says Schrade Walden instead of saying Uncle Henry. So it's a little bit older. I don't have an exact match to the blade, but we're going to match it up best we can. I've already spoken to the owner about that. We'll be trying to do him right on that one. And then he has this beautiful Schrade Walden Mariner's knife. This thing is absolutely gorgeous. Does not look like it's ever been sharpened or used, but the handle's disintegrated on it, he said. Now, I'm not going to close it back. There is great snap on this thing because these pins want to move inward and then the blade catches on the pins. I don't want to risk damaging the edge of that blade. But he sent the knife, and he picked out some gorgeous bone handles for it. These are just beautiful amber colored, or I don't know, that's what I would call it, amber colored. It's kind of got that beautiful root beer glow to it that some of these old bone handles have. These are not aged, but they're dyed to look aged and to look a lot like stag. And we'll see if we can't do this knife right with that. Well, thank you for joining me for another knife journey. Let's dig into it, see what we find. I will begin disassembly by carefully removing this center pin. In my intro, I forgot to mention that these knives were sent in by Frank in Marlboro, New York. I've had a couple of phone conversations with Frank, and he's met people who used to work at the old Schrade factory and has some really cool stories about how he got these knives. I'm very excited about repairing these for him. Before cutting that rivet, I'm double checking to be sure that the blade clearance is still 0.058 inches, the same as the other Schrade knives that I've made rivets for, and thankfully it is. Now I will clean up each of the parts of the knife by hand. Here's something that I have read about before, but this is the first time I've ever seen it for myself. The pile side handle has the serial number of this knife stamped on it, 25848. I have a new blade that is a close match for this knife. It's even stamped Schrade Walden, similar to the original. It is a close match in every way except for the thickness. I can tell by hand that it's thinner than the original blade tang. I will check with the calipers to determine the difference. The original is 0.084 inches. The replacement blade is 0.064 inches, or 20 thousandths of an inch thinner than the original. I do have other blades that are the same thickness as the original, but those blades are too long and the tang and the pivot holes are very different. No matter what I do, I'm going to have to alter a blade to fit this knife. I have decided to use this Schrade Walden blade with a shim. I cut a piece from an old steel liner that is 20 thousandths of an inch thick, and I'll be soldering it to the back side of the blade tang. I'm keeping the blade clamped to the platen of the sander, which acts as a heat sink to prevent the blade from overheating. As soon as I'm finished soldering, I pick the blade up and hold it near the tang by hand to prove that the metal did not get too hot. Now the end of the tang is very hot, but not the rest of the blade. Now that we've got it soldered, I will clean out the pivot hole with my drill, as some of that solder is plugging it. Then I will grind the shim down to match the outline of the tang and thin it just slightly until the whole thing is exactly 0.084 inches thick. I'm switching to a diamond-coated needle-point grinding bit to get down in that tight corner. It has a more fine grit than the sanding drum, so while it cuts more slowly, it does leave a smoother finish. Here I'm cutting away at some of the excess solder. It's a slightly different colored metal than the stainless steel blade, so I want to remove all of it that shows. I have to say that blade tang looks pretty good. Now I will try to replace the missing bolster before I assemble the knife. After prepping the parts, I attached the bolster using CA glue. Originally, the bolster had been pinned in place, but I had to grind off that little post that was going through the liner to remove it from the parts knife. Well, that did not hold. So I clean and prep the parts again, and this time I used the Gorilla Glue Clear that I normally use for handle scales. It will hold almost anything. So I put that on and then clamp that in my vise to give the glue time to cure. As the glue cures, I will use that original center pin and repurpose it to become the replacement Swindon rivet for the new main blade. I am using my .058 inches feeler gauge to get the spacing correct for the Swindon rivet. I made it by taping together a .028 feeler gauge and a .030. I want to share something I find amusing. I've had many of my viewers comment on how patient I seem to be while working on pocket knives and experiencing some of these problems. Friends, I want you to know that does not come naturally to me. I am not a patient man by nature. But that's one thing that has been changing within me over the years. I am much more patient now than I used to be. That's one of the things that the Holy Spirit of God does within the hearts of believers. You see, when we become a Christian, part of God, and we only have one God, but a part of Him or a part of His nature or an aspect of God, if you will, is known as the Holy Spirit of God, and He comes into the heart and lives and dwells within the heart of the believer. And the Spirit produces patience. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 says this, "But the spiritual nature produces love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness." Now, these are not things we have to work at to have in our lives. These are things that come to us by nature. Now, not that we have that nature, but the Spirit has that nature. And so when the Spirit comes to dwell within us, He produces these spiritual fruits. Now, I've never heard of an apple tree that had to fight and struggle to produce apples instead of lemons. If it fails, it doesn't produce lemons. No, it just produces apples because that's part of its nature. When we allow the Holy Spirit of God to work within our lives, that spiritual nature, His presence, begins to produce these spiritual fruits in our lives. It's not something we do. This is not something I've learned. It's something God does within the hearts of His believers. Yield to Him and find and experience the spiritual truths. Just as I get the knife together and I'm ready to test it, the bolster comes loose again. I did say it almost always holds, didn't I? But anyway, it's just obvious glue is not going to hold this in place. I've got to try something better. My first thought was to solder it onto the liner, but I know that would melt the plastic handles, and I really don't want to have to remove the handles. I'll start with an entirely new bolster. The first one I had ground away on the post that went through the liner on the back of it to remove that bolster from the old liner. But this time on the second one, I cut the old liner to remove the bolster, so the post is still intact. Well, I'm trying to see if I can flare this post beyond its normal size. I want to be sure that it will fit tight, as I suspect the hole in the liner is distorted somewhat from losing that first bolster. As you've probably seen me do before, I'm using my vise to compress the back springs so that I can easily insert a new center pin. The old blades in this knife have a rough brushed finish. The new blade has a mirror finish and it really stands out oddly. So I've decided to sand all three blades slightly. I'll use the 220 grit belt and then move up to a 400. I will remove a few scratches from the old blades, but mainly I hope this will just smooth that brushed finish a little bit and rough up the mirror finish on the new blade, and hopefully the two of them can meet in the middle, as it were. Here is where I use that 400 grit belt to smooth out my sanding marks, and this is the point where the finish on all three blades starts looking alike. YouTube. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. Here is Frank's knife. This Uncle Henry is one of the older ones. It was during the Schrade Walden era. Again, those two blades are original. They had some scratches on them. I took some of that out, polishing the blades so they would match. Here is the replacement blade. As you can see, everything matches on it rather well. Got a little oil on it there, but yeah, it turned out very good. I'm very pleased with this knife. I think it turned out just excellent. It's got a couple of minor issues with it, but nothing really to speak of. Of course, you can see, if I can show it to you from this angle, the difference in the thickness on the blades. I'll try opening a couple of them and see if it becomes even more clear to you. There we go. Yeah, huge difference in the thickness on the blades, but it really doesn't seem to matter much. This blade is good and tight, no wobble whatsoever. It is fairly sharp. I didn't hand sharpen it, but I got it machine ready to sharpen, as I think of it. Put that first bevel on there, but it turned out very well. Gave me a lot more trouble than I really wanted it to. You know, of course, I glued the bolster on twice. It did not stay, and then I did take that bolster and drill a hole through it and tried to pin it on there, but I couldn't get the hole in the exact right spot, so the bolster left a big gap there. So that's the reason I took it out, got a new bolster, was able to cut the liner off the old knife, the donor knife, so the bolster was completely intact. Even the little post that goes through the back, that is pinned in place. So was able to pin that in, and yeah, I'm proud of how it looks, proud of how it works. I believe Frank will enjoy the knife. I certainly hope that he does. Thank you for joining me. We'll have one more knife by Frank that we'll show off here in an upcoming video. He sent 2 of them in, and I want to share that one with you soon. But this is the one I finished first, and we'll be getting that back in the mail to him very quickly. Frank, thank you so much. Thank you for all of you viewers out there. I appreciate you being a part of this channel. Thank you for all your words of encouragement, for continuing to watch. May God bless each and every one of you, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.